I know, they're all those suitcases. Well, they are.
Choice. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm 50. See, I taught
David Jackson.
Okay, I taught the chiropractic.
Yeah. Shop. Oh, it's a fancy one. She's not open. I agree. It's a store. It's everything you want here. Yes, that's right. And there's
Here before?
No.
Well, where's everyone from?
Canberra.
Canberra. I spent a lot of time in Canberra, about 20 years.
No.
Good place, Canberra. I miss it. Well, so these days we have about 70 different types of lavender. At the moment, We have the French lavenders in flower, such as ones we can see nearby. The Phony leaf lavenders are in good flower as well, and the Italian and Spanish lavenders with the wings on top that just don't put their shoots up. So as you go around this morning, just gently grab gently rub the leaves or the flowers and have a sniff. You'll pick the different perfumes, the different types of lavender. Now I've got you booked in for a guided tour. So is that what we wanted to do first? Because, well, the rain's coming from that way. So the rain will be coming from here. And it looks a bit dark, but yeah, okay. Well, you're from Canberra, so you should be used to the cold. Not that it's cold. Not that it's cold today. So let's just play it by ear by a few minutes and see if that weather's going to come this way. But I think it's probably the best idea if we go for a wander first, have a bit of a look around. It's not a terribly arduous walk, but we'll just have a bit of a chat about the different types of lavender and the uses and a bit of the local history. So if you jump off the bus, come on in, just gather under the veranda out the front of the shop, and we'll head off from there. After that, we'll come back, help ourselves a cup of tea or coffee, and have a look around in the shop as well. Okay, hope you enjoy yourselves. If we can help, Leslie and myself are here, just sing out.
Yeah, I will. And is there the shops there? I'm thinking the shop. What's your name?
Mr. Daisy?
Daisy.
Yeah.
Hey, good.
She's about 14, I reckon. Help yourself a cup of tea or coffee if you'd like to.
This happened my dog, because I just lost my dog just recently, and oh God, I'm losing everything.
Beautiful. Just get out of the way, though, Daisy.
Well, I've got some fresh. Yeah, well, I've got some nice perfumes on. What pink is much
I just spoke to Trace. She said they might, but you don't want the fruit. I've got what I want. So,
Yeah.
so we do that now. You know, or
Thank you very much for that.
Because it was the last thing you did, it was the last thing I thought of.
22 of you?
yes.
I'll put these ones. So you've got different lavender football over there. Just there.
Unless you want something.
They'd go into the wash with everything.
But
They'd go into the wash with everything else.
Monday.
sure should do spoons, huh?
Let's get the wire clean up. What's that?
Yeah, that's right. Wait till it's dry.
Good morning.
You've
No,
been in a
nothing
good
for me
paddy.
Always wash it up. It's got sort of
There's a well-big kelp you've ever seen one.
pretty old, I'd say.
I reckon he's a Kelpie cross.
A full sun, there's plenty of that around here, usually. Good drainage, so they need a well-drained soil. If they're clay soils, you probably don't have a great deal of in Canberra from memory. Some do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Some do. No.
The new estates do.
Right, so they won't thrive so well in heavy soils like clay. If you do have clay and want to grow some lavender, it's best to maybe dig in some gypsum, help break up the soil, a bit of lime to raise the pH, and maybe mound them up a bit, sort of plant them on mounds just to improve the drainage a bit. They also like a slightly alkaline soil, so if you put on some lime every now and then, that'll just raise the pH and they'll enjoy that a bit more. We get longer stems and better flowering. We don't really apply much fertiliser as such, apart from that lime. A bit of blood and bone around about this time of year usually. Just a bit of nitrogen into the soil, that helps with the flowering as well. We don't do that every year, but now and then it's just a bit of a boost for them. When we're planting, we tend to put in just a general purpose fertiliser, and maybe some sea salt, the seaweed extract, just to get the roots out there and get them going. Around here we don't do any planting in summer because it's way too hot. I lived in Canberra for about 25 years all up, I suppose. So it can get pretty hot there, but here there's a different level of heat. We can be high 40s, even last summer in the low 50s. Really unpleasant. Yeah, so mid 40s is not unusual. High 30s is regular. We occasionally have heat waves you probably hear about of very high temperatures. If we get a hot northerly or westerly wind, it's like living in a furnace in summer. So you're coming at a beautiful time of year right now. Spring is beautiful. Autumn is absolutely beautiful as well. Winter tends to be wet, not as wet as can be in Canberra. We get our rain over winter in general, from usually about April to October. The rest of the last 10 or 15 years, any rain we do get in other times of the year is funneled down from the northwest of Australia, down through the centre, and we just get dumped on very quickly, and then it passes on. In times before that, you could look at the Perth forecast, and 2 days later we'd have that weather pretty reliably. That doesn't happen anymore. So it's a bit up and down, the rainfall. So anyway, that's enough about the weather. Back to lavender, we've got about 70 different types of lavender over about 4 acres. So the plantings go from here up to the top of the hill and out the sides. We have had quite a bit more over the years, but droughts and heat waves and things like that have knocked them around, so we've had up to about 7 acres at times. But it's a massive big job with the pruning. Watering is a big issue in summer, as you can imagine. So pretty much everything's on drippers now, and that's costly affair to keep everything watered as well. So of those types of lavender, we have 5 main groups. We've got French lavenders, like these closest to us here. They tend to flower for 8 or 9 months of the year around here. They've quite a nice perfume when the flowers are fresh. It's quite a pleasant perfume. Once you cut them, they'll go droop pretty quickly and lose their perfume within a few days. Another group, some of the Phony leaf lavenders that some of you have noticed around. The Phony leaf lavenders have a branched leaf, as opposed to pretty much all the other lavenders that have a straight leaf. The Phony leaf lavenders can either have almost no perfume or a bit of a minty lavender perfume, which is quite pleasant, I find. Some people don't particularly like it, but to me it's nice and fresh. Some of them around the base, the Phony leaf ones only get to, say, knee high. Others will get to nearly 2 metres high. So it's a huge
Where do you
variety.
go searching for your lavender plants? Do you import them from overseas?
There's no native lavenders. They're all imported from overseas, yeah. Yeah, they're native to the Mediterranean area.
So if you want a different variety, is it hard to get them in Australia? You have to import them?
We don't personally import them, but we go through wholesalers and that sort of thing to get them. And there's new varieties being bred all the time. You might have seen in places like Bunnings, you'll get a multi-stemmed or multi-flowered varieties of some types of Italian lavenders with the wings on top. To me, they're not the real thing, but they're quite pretty. Yeah, so that's the next variety I was going to mention are the Italian and Spanish lavenders. They're just starting to put up the little shoots right now. They're the ones with the wings on top. And there's whites, greens, pinks, blues, combinations of colours as well. Not very much in the way of perfume. Definitely not useful for oils, but beautiful spring flowering. So, as I said, all those different colours, and it's beautiful little plants. The other ones we have it's called the Lavandula angustifolia, which means narrow leaf, and they're the English lavenders. They're the ones that we use for most of the products you've seen in the shop there. Beautiful perfume. We distill the process of steam distillation, which if it's not raining we can go and have a look at. It's not very fancy. It's the same process that's been used for thousands of years really. They found lavender essential oil in Egypt in the pyramids, and it was tops off and it was still lavender perfume. So it lasts for years and years and years, the right stuff. Okay, the next group of lavenders that we have are the spiked lavenders or the intermedia lavenders. Basically the intermediates mean they're a cross between the spiked lavender and the English lavender. And they flower pretty much the same time as the English lavenders, which is around November through till about January. Beautiful perfume again, a slightly camphorous perfume from the spiked lavender parent. But beautiful perfume, a little bit higher yield, so we get more oil per wheelbarrow full or per bunch, if you like, whatever you like. From the intermediate ones, they're hybrids, they're a bit more vigorous, they tend to be a little bit bigger. When they're not in flower, even when they are in flower, it's kind of hard to pick the difference apart from the perfume. So the perfume's it's pretty special with all of them. Now, shall we go for a walk, or are you happy here? Yeah, to get into this, my parents started the place off here, put the first plants in the ground in 1991. Leslie and myself moved over here. She was in Albury, I was in Narendra. We moved over here in 2000, and a few years later we've taken over. Mum and Dad are in Tanunda, not far away from where you stayed last night. They're still involved, they're pretty much retired now. They're happy to play bridge 3 or 4 times a week and on bowls and that sort of thing. So yeah, they're enjoying life in the Barossa. But they looked at the climate, the rainfall, the aspect, all that soils and all that sort of thing, and thought, well, the Barossa needs something a bit different from the wonderful cellar doors and wineries and food things, and they sort of went, well, let's do that. There's quite a few lavender farms popped up around Australia, mostly southeast Australia in those days. Most people didn't realise that it was a lot of hard work.
So you got to harvest it by hand, haven't you?
Yeah, the harvest by hand. Yeah, so it's a lot of hard work. Most of the year I wish I was about a foot shorter because the bushes are all down at this far, and it's pretty hard on the back. Or maybe shorter and younger, still. Yeah, so, well, what have we got?
Right now.
Shall we have a bit of a stroll? We don't have to go very far.
You want to have a little...
But as we go around, as I said, just gently rub the leaves or the flowers and have a sniff. There's probably not many bees around today, but a general rule. Okay.
Look at, and they threw in a packet of, huh? as gifts. And they threw in a packet of tea, lavender tea for nothing.
Oh, that's
And they weren't very expensive.
okay.
And then I wanted to buy hand towels for a gift. And there was a washer in it too. They were made in. But I think I might separate that.
Yeah,
And give the hand towel, because that's what I want to buy, a hand towel.
yeah.
Because she's into hand towels too.
Okay.
And then I bought some lip balm.
Oh, right, okay. I have a hand towel in my kitchen with lavender embroidered and it stays on the rail in my kitchen.
Trouble is with it.
What's
So
this,
I'll
mate?
get them over. Alright, so if I could just say thanks again, folks, for visiting.
Yes, I will.
It's been lovely to meet you
Oh,
all.
yes, I will. I'll put it in my
And hope you enjoy the rest of your
love
travels.
it.
Have a
Smells
pleasant
nice
time.
and relaxing.
We do
We're all
have
gonna go
a couple of
home
lucky
and
door prizes here.
Oh, thank you.
Anyone from Belconnen?
Yes, me.
Two, three. Okay. Anyone from Scullen?
Higgins.
There?
We won't get it. There's too many from Tuggeranong.
Responsible person there.
I'm actually from Belconnen suburb.
We do have a Belconnen.
I am a Belconnen
That
suburb.
lady looks like the winner then. I know there's a couple from Belconnen.
Okay, so who's the winner?
The lady
From
The lady
Belconnen.
from Belconnen. Faye.
a few to choose from.
This one.
Well, can we narrow it down to say
Monash.
Page, Miranda?
Oh, we do have.
Miranda. Oh, the lady here might be winner then.
No, we've got a Belconnen. Suburb.
I'm actually from Belconnen. Suburb.
Yeah.
Faye, I think you've missed out.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. You might have to share.
It's all right.
No, there's a place I lived when I was in Canberra. Higgins, Holt, Kayleen. Oh,
Joy.
What about the south side?
Jill.
I do like the south side.
Jill. Aranda. She was
So once
in
again, folks,
Aranda.
thank you all very much. Have a fantastic holiday, and
Yeah,
we look
that's
forward
good.
to seeing
That's
you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Raffle it.
You've already
Yeah, I thought that was better than picking us up.
I think it was too.
You've already given a raffle. No, he was donating. Joy.
All right, now we've got a bus smelling like lavender. And we're off to the Barossa Chateau, and it's quite a swanky place. And I'm not sure, when do the roses bloom? Anyone know? There's something like 22 acres of roses. And 5 kilometres of pathways. Now you don't have to do all that, of course, but the gardens are just beautiful.
November.
We're going to the Hyacinth.
That's
Yeah.
Smell pretty.
Oh, coming back from the Murray. Yeah.
So we're heading out now. You will be happy for those that didn't eat a big brekkie. We're on an art and antique tour followed by light lunch, Thai tea style, sandwiches, quiches, scones, tea and coffee. Yeah, so that will be our lunch because obviously we're not going to, we board at 2:30, the cruise departs at 5, so yeah, even though it's a light lunch, it is a time to have something to eat. And I do know there was a couple that didn't eat much of a brekkie this morning, so it should be nice. We're there for about an hour and a half and then we're heading to Maggie Beer's farm shop, which will be very interesting, where we hear about Maggie's story and enjoy a little bit more time to shop for those who'd like a little bit of shopping. Leslie, we do get a $10 per person voucher for in-store shop. So that little tiny corner that you have, or for some of us we may need to share bags. But it and then on to the port this afternoon.
Look at the little kangaroos. 4 of us.
I think we're wanting to head off 11. He said okay. I said you've got 25 minutes to come. I think one may have one off. Yeah.
Just to say thank you for coming up. It's lovely to see everybody. And I guess after COVID hit us back in 2020, we didn't really know what to expect. South Australia got out and support was regional business, and we finally got able to get on with some a normal life, couldn't we? So what a relief that was. Before that, we had bushfires. I'm just letting you know there's a little wombat down there, just in case anybody got a donation, willing to give a donation. Barossa Wildlife Rescue is one of the organisations that's local here in Lindop. They give incredible support to local wildlife and any kind of animal that needs it. And Rose has been doing this for something like 30 years, so it's just one of the little organisations that we like to look after. And my other little bit of intro is just to let you know where you are in our lands. This room that you're in has a beautiful art collection going back between, say, 100 and 500 years. But the Aboriginal people of this land were here for much more than that, so thousands of years ago. So you're on the land of the Nandri people, that's how it's spelled. There's a little map on the back if you're interested to have a look. And we've got some gorgeous little artifacts over here on the right. So one of them we found on this property, just about 50 or so metres from the front door. So you're welcome to have a look at the stone tool from around here, and we've got a few more interesting pieces in there. And the other piece I've got here, just as a brief note, was found at a burial site very close by after some roadworks uncovered some burial site many years ago. The Aboriginal people were given permission to do an archaeological dig, and when they did, they found 3 bodies down there, about not very far under the ground, probably about a metre or 800 mil. And they found a number of artefacts. This was one of them, and it turned out that the bodies and the artefacts were dated back to around about 5,000 years. So you get a chance to look at the 5,000 people. A couple of hobbies, boomerangs here, and these guys are called Wearies. They're W-I-R-R-I. They would be used for hunting and catching and killing smaller to medium animals, but sadly the Aboriginal people, like all other humans on the planet, they fight each other, so these were used against other humans as well. So they believe that the spirit of the animal or of the human that you kill with these will pass to the item, therefore if you happen to touch it, they can pass to you. The Aboriginal people that gave it to me, the family, they didn't tell me that when they gave it to me, they just handed it over, so I was a bit anxious. I said, not to worry, don't worry mate, you've got a good heart. So you folks have permission. The elder of this land, of the Nandri people, is Quentin Aegis or Aegis. Very, very important man in South Australian terms. You don't see him on TV too often. We do occasionally, but he's one of the more celebrated and more important Aboriginal elders in South Australia. This is his land, however, he's got connections into so many other tribal groups. But look, when you get a chance, have a look through these lovely pieces. Now, the art collection that you've got here was pulled together. Somebody asked me when they walked in the building how old the building was. And before I go there, I probably just need to explain where this came from. So this was pulled together by Herman and Ingrid Thun. Herman in particular was originally born in Russia, but he was of German ancestry, had to leave Russia because of that ancestry back in World War II. He escaped to Iran, was arrested there, and when he left Iran, he came to Australia in a roundabout sort of a way. And when he arrived here, we arrested him, and I don't know, some of you folks might be of the age group that you can remember there was internment camps in Australia, and he got put into one of those internment camps up in Lovedale in the Riverland. So we did that for Germans and Japanese and Italians and probably Russians and various others. So anyway, he finally was released, came to the Barossa, started making beautiful wine here for another little company down the road that is now called Probus Wines. Ended up buying a little block of land with the Vantown building, turned it into Yaldara back in 1947. Used an Aboriginal name for that. And started making money back in the late 40s and the beginning of the 50s. South Australia and Australia generally was going through a really good time. We were going through an economic boom. And so he was making a fair bit of money very, very early on. So from 1950 onwards, he was able to travel overseas. managed to get back to places like Germany and into the UK and pick up some beautiful artwork. He always had this vision and intention to collect a wonderful collection to leave as kind of a legacy, but he loved art, so he was very passionate about everything you see in the room here. So when he couldn't travel, he had people looking out around the world for him, in particular in Europe. But he did find a few things in Australia, in the Sydney and Melbourne auction houses, a couple in South Australia, not too much. But most of this nearly 1,500 pieces in the collection here, of the original collection, most of it he pulled together in the 50s and 60s. Just a few things in the 70s, like somebody was looking at these beautiful pedestals before. They're quite beautiful. They're around about mid-1700, and he found them while he was on holiday in Canada. So he was always looking. Didn't really find very much in the 80s and 90s, but he was always on the lookout. I'm sad to say, in the 50 years after he began that journey, he handed his business over to his two boys, Robert and Peter, who within a couple of years decided to sell the whole lot. By that stage, he had 500 acres of land, had one of the most important wineries in the Barossa Valley, and he was forced to move on. So he couldn't stop his kids, but what he did do was buy a little bit he kept a little bit of the land that was on the property. So he kept this bit of land, a couple of houses out the front there, and he kept the motel next door. He was a bit of a pioneer in wine tourism as well, so he built the first motel in Barossa. So back in the year 2000, after they sold Galdara in 98, they sold Galdara for $28 million. He took his portion of the money and poured it into building this building. So it looks like it's very old, but it's actually only 21 years old. And he ended up relocating all of this gorgeous art from Galdara up to this building in the year 2000 when he opened the doors. Had the Governor of South Australia come here in 2001, and then the year after, it was actually only about 5 months later. I don't know if any of you are aware that Queen Elizabeth visited this property. Some of you nods out there. So Queen Elizabeth came here, and of course it's such an important week for us, for a couple of weeks really, isn't it? It's been a big, Maggie and I have been a bit glued to the TV because we're not even monarchists necessarily, but we're quite taken by this incredible woman. And of course she had an influence over this property and over the Barossa. So she came here in the year 2002, February 28th. She came here just for this event to come and open this property. She was in Canberra. They flew her into Adelaide. She caught the wine train up to Gawler. She was brought up here in a little black limousine, and then she came through and met about 100 people just outside in that beautiful garden. You may not have time today to get out there, but if you come back, please do. You're welcome any time out in the gardens. It's a bit miserable out there today as well. And the roses aren't quite out, but there's a couple out there. So she came through, she met 100 people out there, dignitaries from all around Barossa and South Australia. She came in here and did a private tour of the art gallery where she discovered things that they had in common. So there's one particular piece that there's only two that we know of in the world. We've got one here, and she's got the other one. I've had the other one. So I'll point that out to you in a minute. But there was a number of things like these yellow urns just on the pedestals here. We found out that they exist in Buckingham Palace. There's a lot of things in here that have a royal connection, probably in many royal families, not just in the British. So that was a wonderful thing for Herman and her to exchange those discussions, and of course they had a little bit of ancestry in common because of their German ancestry. She came through and had lunch in the barrel room, and then she did a big walk through the gardens, and she spent 5 hours on the property, which is pretty incredible for Queen Elizabeth. So she built a very immediate and lovely relationship or rapport with Herman and Inga, and that's why she spent so much time here. I've now had that feedback from many key people, including people that were close to the Queen at the time, so that was very important. After she left, Herman and Inga found it a bit harder to keep running everything that they were doing because they were 92 or 91 when they met the Queen. A few years later, they placed part of the property on the market, and Maggie and I got involved and purchased that from them then. And they passed away eventually in the year 2009. And she passed away first, Inga passed away first, and she was just a little bit younger than Herman, but he was 98 when he passed away, basically died of a broken heart. He stopped eating because he was so upset with his loss. He felt he had nobody left. Saying that, right up until 2 weeks before they passed away, they were still driving around a little golf buggy, talking to the guests and talking to the staff, and up until the day that Herman went into hospital, he still had his finger on the pulse in here telling the staff what to do, so it's quite an incredible character. So he passed away at the age of 98, and his two sons inherited all of this. but only one of the boys, I found out only recently, they both inherited the art collection, but I believe Dieter purchased the art from his brother. That's what it seems to be. I haven't actually asked him that question yet, but only one son owns this art collection now. They sold this property. Robert forced the sale of this property too, 2 years later. So Maggie and I came in here in 2011. So in the last 10 years, trying to understand what's in the room here. Maggie and I have always loved art, so we've brought a few things in that we love as well. But a few little things for you. So what we'll do is we'll let you go for a wander around the room in a minute before you go back through to the main area. But a couple of quick things I'll point out to you so that you can have a good look around. This one's one of them. Actually, before I go there, the three big themes in the collection are roses, number one theme. So they planted this beautiful 30,000 rose garden around the property, both properties, back in the year 2000. But for 50 years prior to that, they'd been collecting beautiful antiques or artwork that had a rose theme. So when you're looking, you'll see that you're surrounded by roses. One of my favourite pieces, or two of them, are the beautiful big figurines that you see, the tall lady and gentleman over on the far right-hand cabinet, just underneath the painting. They've got roses painted all over them, so take a quick look. They're very rare. My guess is that they were actually made somewhere between 1740 and 1747, somewhere in that range. And Hassan happens to be a company that doesn't exist. It only lasted for a short period of time before it got swallowed up by the King of France and took it into become another company. So they're very rare, but they've got incredible paintings all over them. The potpourri holders, those blue urns you see just in front of the mirror, they're actually, they hold rose petals so that everything will smell more fragrant around their castles and palaces and chateaus. So they're beautiful pieces, and the blue has always struck me as being one of the colours, some of the features in this room that I can remember from when I used to visit the Eldara as a child back 20 years ago. Never thought I'd be standing here talking about it. What else? You'll find roses formed into rose shapes in the porcelain, painted onto other porcelain or carved into marble at the back there, and painted onto paintings. The other things, he built his original business of the Eldara way back in 47. He built it around the idea of celebrating food, wine and music, wine being a big one of course. And when he was forced to come into this building or build this building, he did exactly the same thing. He celebrated food, wine and music. So when you're looking around the room, you'll find images or people holding, maybe picking fruit or holding instruments or holding goblets. So he always celebrated food, wine and music in the collection here. Sorry, I keep on thinking somebody's coming. And then the final theme is actually these three beautiful cabinets just behind you here. So I'm going to go over in 2 seconds. I'm going to point to something that is important for you to have a look at. And then you can sort of wander around at your own leisure. But those cabinets are the beginning of porcelain being made in Europe from 1710. So there's some very important pieces in these cabinets that tell a little bit of a story of a number of quick companies that I'll just list them off for you. That Meissen was the very first company to produce porcelain back in Europe in 1710. 1718, there was another company called Vienna popped up shortly after Meissen, started producing beautiful wares. There's some beautiful urns in the very top of the centre cabinet there. You'll see with Vienna written next to it. Vienna. After that was the Bessin pieces, 1740. They popped up in France, got discovered by the soon-to-be King of France, Louis XV. He basically took Bessin away from where it was being made, put it into a little chateau near where he lived in the Palace of Versailles, and had one of his many mistresses look after the company for him. He had to be able to have it. After the Bessin, there was a quick succession. We had a company called Chelsea. Some of the names I mentioned in a second, some of you might recognise. But Chelsea popped up in 1745 in London. It was an artist that ran away from the very first company, Meissen, and started making work in London, caught the attention of the royal family. It was King George III at the time, and because he was buying it, everybody else wanted to buy it. So Chelsea went very ballistic in the sense that it went through the roof in terms of its business. The man who owned it had to move out of London because it was too small. He bought a pottery company up north and moved his little business up to a place called Derby. So some of you might know that name. Derby's a well-known British porcelain producer. So we've got some beautiful blue urns in the top of that middle cabinet as well. You'll see some of the names are in front of the pieces as you look around. 1748, some of you might know this name, they're called Villeroy Wash or Mock. You can still go to David Jones today and pick up beautiful pieces, very elegant glassware or plateware. They do vanities and so many other things. So they are a mainstream company available at our doorstep, and they've been around since 1748. They began in France, but they moved to Luxembourg. It's still around. 1751, another great company you might recall is Worcester. They popped up in 1751. There's a dinner over on the far left-hand side that you'll see the Worcester written in front of it, and you'll see some beautiful glazes up in the top right of the other cabinet on my right over there. One of them with cows on them, one of their more trademark images that they would use. So they popped up in 51. They ran into, sadly, a bit of financial trouble only. I'm now told it was about 10 years ago. And somebody bought them out or helped them because they're still making beautiful work. So Worcester is still around, and they've got one of the great art galleries of porcelain in Worcestershire, I believe. Worcester, and then the final one is Limoges. There's one little piece, we've only got one piece of Limoges in the collection. It's in the right-hand cabinet in the middle shelf, right down the far end. A very beautiful little fairy sitting on a pedestal. They popped up in 1760. And in France, another company that seems to have somehow survived. So of those companies that I mentioned, the only one that doesn't exist today is Vienna. All five of the others exist. And so going back to 1710, 311 or 12 years ago, you can still go back to that company and pick up beautiful Meissen pieces from there in Dresden in Germany. A couple of things that don't fit into our themes, just before I let you go for a wander around. This little table is a beautiful micro mosaic piece. So when you have a look at it, I'm happy to try and talk from there if you need me to, or you can try and talk if you've got a phone with you. Micro mosaic is incredibly fine tiles that have been turned into this beautiful image. So you'll see a little brick pattern all around the edge here that is very obviously a tile pattern. But when you look more closely, you realise the image in the centre of this table is very fine tiles, all depth of colour to create this gorgeous image of the fruit bowl. So if you get a chance, have a good look at that. The depth is amazing. You start to realise the patience of the artist to do beautiful things like this. Another couple of things that don't fit into our themes are these mirrors up above your heads and in front of me. The mirror on the middle column and over on the right-hand side, I found out some years ago, I used to think they were German or Russian eagles because of Herman's heritage. But I had a gentleman who came in here years ago who explained that they were called Federation mirrors and they were from the USA. And the cannonballs around the outside of those mirrors give us an indication of when they were made. So the one on the right has 16 cannonballs. It tells us that was made in around about 1796 or 7, roughly. And the one in the middle column has about 24 cannonballs. That tells us that was made in around about 1820 in the USA. So these were being made as the US was turning into the country that it is today. So it was before the Civil War as they were developing. Now, I suppose the interesting thing about those mirrors is there's just nothing else in the whole collection, nothing else that I'm aware of that Herman owned in that time that was from the USA. So these are the only two pieces, which makes me think he didn't buy them because of their heritage from the US. He bought them because he fell in love with the art pieces because of those beautiful eagles up there. The one on the far left.
I'm giving you 5 minute warnings.
I know, I'm almost done. So the one on the far left, that little black ring around the mirror represents the morning. I found out from another gentleman that he was a British art historian. Came to me about 1.5 years ago, explained that black ring around the mirror represents the morning for Vice Admiral Nelson, who was killed in the Battle of Trafalgar back in 1805. So that sort of gave us another pinpoint to a piece in the ring. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to point to one piece over here, which is the piece that Queen Elizabeth had. So she was a bit surprised. She spent a bit of time talking to Herman about that piece. It's called Ludwigsburg. They don't exist anymore. When you're looking at the beautiful dress of the lady getting out of the carriage, take note that it's actually real lace dipped into porcelain. So it's a very unusual way of making beautiful porcelain pieces. So once I've pointed over here, you're welcome to stand up and go for a wander around. We'll open the doors and then you can go and get a cup of tea, coffee, and Mandy's got some food going to come out to you as well. So I'll come over here and point to this little piece and have a little wander around.
I can't afford to wander.
Yes, walk this way.
Isn't she beautiful?
It's very good.
So the sandwich mate.
Yes, that's what I said. I bought for my aunt, and because she likes it, so she was having ladies over for tea, so she
Trying to get rid of that.
brought it out.
Trouble with the springs there.
Because it was empty. And when she picked it up, for some reason she turned the dishwasher soap.
Now, I must look at this table. Oh, you have flowers. But I do have an ivory bank. A pedestal.
he loved the Renaissance period, this king. So when he came to power, he
We came back here, and obviously by the name Pheasant Farm that we have here, obviously very successful in this breeding of the bird. So successful in fact, of course one day Maggie said, what are we going to do with all of these pheasants? So of course, you probably all guessed right, yep, she decided it was time to start cutting them. So on the floor here is the floorboards. This is the original home of Maggie. This is the original kitchen, living area, main bedroom, and then the daughter's bedroom. Just all right side and side. So we get from Maggie. Oh, the books for her sign. There's not even a script, it's actually a nice little visual. Yeah, it is. So, on the book, that Maggie Foundation. The Maggie Foundation is the foundation you've all heard about, not really.
tomorrow.